Well, hey there, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Luthorville. So this video is one that has been a rather long time in coming. Approximately 2 years ago, I created a video that was a review of my 2016 Ram 5500 chassis cab truck. And when I made that video, I promised that I would do a follow-up review. So here we are, 2 years later, doing the follow-up. To give you a quick little history of the Ram 5500, it's kind of interesting. So Sterling Trucks is a company that started in the early 20th century and was around for a very long time. Sterling built trucks all the way into the 1950s. And that was when Sterling went out of business. So they were around for a good 50 years. Then, in the 1990s, about 40 years after Sterling went out of business, Freightliner, another very famous American truck manufacturer, decided that they wanted to bring the Sterling line back. So they got permission to use the name Sterling, and in the 1990s they started producing Sterling trucks, started making dump trucks and commercial trucks, and they also made a chassis cab truck known as the Sterling Bullet. Now, the Sterling Bullet was produced for about a year or so, and at that time, with the ownership of Freightliner being shared with Chrysler, they also started making the Ram 5500, which was basically the Sterling Bullet with different logos and different badging applied to the truck. So, after about a year or two of making the Sterling Bullet, they discontinued the Sterling line and stopped making Sterlings and continued to make the Ram 5500. So, in a way, you could say the Ram 5500 has a very long history because it's kind of related to Sterling and the Sterling Bullet. I have to say, I've been extremely happy with this truck and with the way that it has turned out. I originally had this truck constructed specifically to tow a commercial flatbed trailer upon which I was building my tiny house. Therefore, I designed this truck to be like a tugboat for the land. I did everything that I could to make sure that it had the maximum towing capacity that I could possibly achieve. And it has performed flawlessly in that regard. Now, so far, I have had to replace the front tires, and that was at around 30,000 miles I had to do that. Now, this truck weighs approximately 10,000 pounds. About 60% of that weight is in the front, about 40% is on the rear axle. So if you do the math, that means that there's about 6,000 pounds in front, 4,000 pounds in back. That means that there is approximately 3,000 pounds riding on each tire in the front. On the back, since it's a dually, there is only 1,000 pounds on each tire. So that is a massive, massive difference. The front tires are literally supporting 3 times the weight that the back is. So if the front tires lasted for 30,000 miles, in theory, the 4 back tires should last to around 90,000 miles. Now, I realize the rear tires are typically the drive tires, so they might wear out a little bit faster than that, but based purely on weight alone, in theory, they should last 3 times longer, so we'll see what happens. Now, one thing that I really wanted to do with this vehicle was register it as what they call a 3-axle house car, and that is a vehicular definition here in California that basically turns the vehicle into an RV. You'll often see commercial semi-trucks that have labels on them that says RV use only, and those are no longer commercial vehicles. They're considered part of the RV setup of towing a fifth wheel trailer. So I've tried to do that with this vehicle. I've gone to the DMV, I've gone to the California Highway Patrol, and unfortunately, none of them have been willing to re-register this vehicle as something that tows an RV. I am 100% certain that I am within my legal right to change the registration as such, because people do that sort of thing all the time. But like I said, unfortunately, I haven't found anyone knowledgeable enough about the law and about three-axle house cars. Even after I've gone over the law with them face-to-face in person, they still don't seem to grasp the fact that this is not a commercial vehicle. It is actually a passenger vehicle. So we'll see. Hopefully that can get sorted out eventually. The other thing about this truck that is a negative thing is that there have actually been 2 recalls on it. Now, thankfully, they're not really severe, terrible recalls. One is the water pump has a potential to go out. They don't actually have a fix for that yet at the time this video was created. The other is that there's a problem with the column shifter, that when the vehicle is in park, it could potentially pop out of park and roll. So that's something else that I eventually need to get fixed. Although that problem is something you can easily overcome just by making sure you always use the parking brake. So, a thing about this truck that kills me is the fact that, the gas mileage, okay? I get about 12.5 to 13 miles per gallon on average. That is brutal coming from riding a motorcycle for 10 years, because that's all I had. For over 10 years, I only owned a motorcycle, and that would get 50 miles to the gallon. So 13 is really brutal. But I have learned a few little tricks. For example, when I'm on the highway, I usually drive at about 60 miles an hour. Most of the speed limits in California are 65. But I noticed that if I keep it at 60, I actually get about an extra like 1 mile per gallon. So it's much more efficient to keep it at 60 instead of going up to 65. Another thing I've done just to make it a little bit easier to actually purchase diesel fuel is I actually designed a little app on Microsoft Excel that I just have on the smartphone. And it's basically a fuel calculator that I built, so I can look at the miles per gallon that I'm getting and then the range that is left over, and put in the price of a gallon of diesel, and it will tell me exactly how many gallons I need to purchase and what the total cost is going to be. And so that's just a little convenience thing, so that I can, instead of going back and forth and worrying about getting changed and stuff like that, I can just punch all that information into the phone, get a total, and then walk into the gas station and say, I need, X amount of dollars on pump whatever, and I can go about my way after that. So that's pretty cool. The final thing that I wanted to mention about this truck is that when I did the first video, when I did the first review, I was praising the exhaust brake and how well it works. And I noted that if I'm in cruise control, and let's say I'm going up and down like a hilly kind of area, that it really holds whatever speed I set it at extremely well, and that the exhaust brake is really impressive in that regard. Well, someone corrected me and said that they don't think it's the exhaust brake, they think it's the gear ratio. And it turns out that they were correct. The gear ratio on this truck is extremely low. It's the lowest I could get. It's like 4.1, which is something that I did for towing purposes. And so I noticed after that person made that comment, I decided that I would actually monitor the exhaust brake usage when I was going up and down hills. And sure enough, the exhaust brake almost never comes on. And therefore, I think that person was correct, that it's all about the low gear ratio that's allowing the truck to slow down. But the exhaust brake is definitely a godsend on this truck, because The trailer that I pull with this, the tiny house, is extremely heavy. It weighs around 20,000 pounds. And I've taken this truck and the tiny house down the 14 in California from Antelope Valley down into San Fernando Valley. Now, for those of you who don't know, you're not from California, that is one of the longest and steepest highways that I've ever been on. It goes from around 3,000 feet down to around 500 feet over the course of, I think it's maybe 20 miles. So it is a very long, very steep grade. And when I was pulling that 20,000 pound trailer with this truck, the exhaust brake on the steepest parts of that hill was at less than 50%. So that was fantastic, knowing that I was pulling such an incredibly heavy load behind me, and the exhaust brake was barely working in order to slow me down, in order to maintain my speed. So I never had to tap my brakes. I could cruise all the way down this steep hill and feel really confident and really in control of the truck the whole time. So that was really impressive, and those sorts of experiences are what made me really grateful that I took the time to do all the research and put together a truck like my Ram 5500, because when it comes to towing, this little sucker is quite a beast. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this helps a little bit if you might be thinking about purchasing a Ram 5500, to know how things have worked out a couple of years down the line. And remember, if your ambitions do not scare you, they are not big enough.